Once again, welcome everybody. My name is Kat Rodriguez. I'm going to be the facilitator tonight. So for the last several days, you have allowed us to take you on a journey. You've heard about the history of the Migrant Trail, how and why we came together. You've heard about the history of the Southwest. You've gained some understanding into the fact that much of what's happening on the border is racist, it's divisive, and it's intentional. You've heard about the impact of militarization has had on First Nations of this land and how occupation, colonization, and resistance continue 528 years later. You've learned about the strategies that have been used to control the US-Mexico border are currently being used with our taxpayer dollars in the name of our security on a massive, global, and deadly scale. You've heard about the effects of border militarization on the flora, fauna, and natural resources of our communities. And you've hopefully learned that those attacks on natural resources are not isolated to the border. These are things that are happening in communities all over the world. And you've also been learning about the deaths on the border, the devastation they cause, the inhumanity that is affected as the remains of our sisters and brothers are so hard to find and increasingly difficult to identify. And that closure continues to be denied to, at this point, thousands of families. So immigration is an issue, and I call immigration an issue, not a problem, because it's an issue that every country in this world deals with, inflow and outflow of people. It's just one that our government has chosen in a willful way to make worse. So it has many layers. And tonight, I'm really pleased to introduce someone that's going to talk about one of those layers, someone who's living in what we would call an othered status in this country. So Jessica Rodriguez, no relation, is a lead organizer with the Southside Worker Center. She is amazing. She is, the Southside Worker Center supports community of worker leaders, building collective power and raising the standards of worker conditions so that workers can take part in dignified work and earn just wages. Throughout her work at the Southside Worker Center, she's helped recover thousands of dollars in wages for workers, stop criminalization, detention, and deportation of families, defend the rights of migrant workers, and develop migrant-led worker-owned cooperatives. And tonight she's going to be sharing some personal experiences with us. So with that, I will turn this over to Jessica Rodriguez.
Buenas tardes, mucho gusto. My name is Jessica Rodriguez. Good evening, everybody. Thank you all for coming. I don't get to see your faces anymore, but I got to see a few names that are very familiar, so I'm very grateful that you all joined it, and also for this opportunity to talk to you. So what I have planned for today, I will talk to you a little bit about me, about 10 minutes about me, and then the next 10 to 15 minutes about the work of the Worker Center. And then the following 5 to 10 minutes will be connecting the dots, and then leave some room for Q&A. The instructions, Kat and the other folks from the Migrant Trail have done it on the past panelists, so make sure you submit your questions when they're necessary. So again, my name is Jessica Rodriguez. I was born in Chihuahua, Mexico. That was the state that I was born in. I grew up. I migrated to Tucson about 15 years ago. Those are the only two places that I know as home. We migrated because of my mom wanted to come closer to her family. Her family at the time was living here in Tucson, but then also considering the conditions for a single mother, not being supported, and knowing that there was not really a future ahead of us in Chihuahua. So she made the decision to bring us north, right? Like seeking a better future, seeking a better place for us to live. So yeah, we came here to the United States. I was 13 years old. My mom and my two sisters, that's all we had with the little things that we had. I got here, I arrived to middle school for like 6 months, And then I had the transition to high school, which was a lot, like within the first year that I migrated. Not only, and it was a different place where I was living at, a different language, but then also school itself was very different. During high school, I was exposed, I was lucky enough to go to one of the schools that had the highest Hispanic population in the city, which made the transition a little bit easier. And also I started learning a lot about the things that were happening here in the U.S. It was not too long after we arrived. In 2006, that was when a federal bill was introduced that will make it a felony for anybody who will come in contact with an undocumented person. And that's having in mind anybody that you will have in the car with you, anybody who was living with you, even if you will give them food, even if you will give them water. It didn't make it out from the committees, the Senate and the House, but it's something to consider that these things have been happening and they're being molded for a very long time. I was able at a really young age to participate in actions. There was a lot of high school walkouts during that time against this bill at that time. And I'm highlighting this bill because all those things connect concerning the circumstances that we're seeing even today. So I was able to do some of that. I graduated and also to highlight that same year in Arizona, Prop 300 was passed and signed into law. If you're not familiar with Prop 300 in Arizona, it makes it that every single person who seeks higher education, adult education, and even child care, if you're undocumented, to pay out-of-state fees. So they triple, sometimes quadruple the expenses of attending college. So keep that in mind for somebody who has more than one child, somebody who just came to this country, somebody who's trying to seek for something better for their children. Is not attainable, right? And it's an infrastructure that has been built on as for a while. I graduated from high school in 2009, and I started at community college with one class at a time. It was just one class is what I could afford to take, right, as an undocumented student. At the same time, I found a space of other undocumented students where we started searching for scholarships for other undocumented students, where we started like gathering resources that we could use to continue our higher studies. And little by little, like ended up forming an organization. An organization came out of that. That organization is still active. At the same time, while this was happening in 2010, MTW2020 got signed into law. So it was year after year, time after time, and another attack on migrants. And this one was targeted to people of color, right? Like it was the show me your papers, the color of your skin will determine if you will continue with your life or you'll be separated from your family. And it was regardless of status. So just to make it very clear, there was a lot of folks who got either jailed, detained, or deported, regardless if they were citizens. And not to say that those who were not ended up in the carceral system or the detention system and further deported and probably have not made it back yet to their families. So that was in 2010. There was a lot of mobilization. Right now is the time that we all celebrating those who have been for almost a decade of resistance of MTW2020. So it's May of 2020. It's been 10 years. So there's a lot of people who have been trailblazers in the movement who have done a lot of work through decades that allow for like the fruits that we're seeing, the results that we're seeing, and the wins that we have as a community. So let's also recognize that it's not just one person or just a single group who brought us here, but it's actually the collective work that has happened throughout the years. And most of this work has been led always by women, by queer folks, by people of color, Black, immigrant, undocumented, indigenous. Have that in mind. Those are the people that need to be at the front of the movements. They are the ones who are impacted the most. So 2012, and I'm going really fast because it's a lot of information and there's a lot of things that I want to talk about. Move fast forward between 2010 and 2012, 2009, 2012, I would say, after the Dream Act failed in the Senate, that was a blow for the undocumented youth who were seeking to adjust their status. So there was a lot of mobilization after that, where a lot of undocumented youth were taking the streets and opening the way for what we have right now, which is DACA. And have in mind, DACA is not a long-time solution. It's not a permanent, and it doesn't solve anything on the situations that we have here. When we look at DACA or Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, and if you're not familiar with it, I'll break it down really quick. It's a program created under the Obama administration to relieve some youth from deportation by providing them a work permit. And that's it. Each state played a role on how they wanted to treat DACA folks. In Arizona, they said, no, you are not allowed to drive. No, you're not allowed to attend public universities and public colleges as in-state tuition. All we care about is for you to just get employment and contribute your taxpayer dollars to the state. And that led up to so much more organizing, so much more battles. Within the group that I was part of, we were able to obtain in-state tuition at the community college back in February of 2013. That was one of the greatest victories that we have seen here, led by directly impacted folks, undocumented youth. And it was a great moment, right? And subsequently after that, we started seeing the numbers of undocumented youth graduating more than ever. I myself graduated in 2014. I was able to afford more classes, to take more, to qualify for more scholarships and being able to finish school. It took me 5 years just to finish my 2-year associates. So I was able to do that. Then in 2014, after my graduation, I was trying to figure out what to do. Institution, even though we had it at the community colleges, was not available in the universities and the 3 main universities that we have here in Arizona. So I started looking around what I'm gonna do next, what needs to happen, and that's when we started getting folks out to vote. Like I remember knocking on doors, getting people registered to vote, trying to change the representation at the time. And I did that kind of work for almost 3 years. So from that in 2017, I came to this opportunity of applying for the Worker Center job as an organizer, the lead organizer there. They found some money that they will be able to pay somebody to help them develop as an organizational plan for at least 3 years. And I'm gonna speak a little bit about that work. And before I move that, I wanna highlight that about DACA. Even though DACA right now, it's something that it's happening, it's something that can be taken away any day. The court decision is coming up really soon. It could happen this coming up Monday, or anytime in the summer. And think of the things that every single time they have us on the edge on what's gonna happen with our lives, right? Like we already have these 2 temporary work, where we don't know what happens if expire. ICE has access to all of this information. They know where we live, they know where we work. And just to have that every single Monday or every single time the Supreme Court makes a piece or opinion on all of these things, like it's further increasing this trauma that this country is doing to all of us as migrants. And that's just one layer. We're not talking about the other things and all the identities that we carry. So have this in mind, that if the Supreme Court rules against us, and and aligns with the current administration that we have, that we already know is racist, that we already know that is white supremacist, and we have seen the true colors that they have. It's really wearing us down. Like it is wearing us down. And it's just not me. There's like 680,000 other folks who have DACA, that other people who didn't qualify for it, and then 12 million folks that still live in the shadows. And while we say that they live in the shadows, like they are resilient and they are proud, and something that this country has worked so hard to vary. So in 2017, I joined the Southside Worker Center. You heard the work that we do from Kat, but a little of the programs that we have there. It's for the membership. So we have a membership, almost 100% of them are migrants. Almost 100% of them are Spanish speaker only or indigenous speakers. So they are trying to like make a living. So we run a day labor center where folks come in and they go out to work on a daily basis. Sometimes those days are great, sometimes they're not. And right now with the COVID-19, they are literally not going out to work. People don't have money, so there's not longer projects that they can get hired for. Most of the construction on any work site, we have seen that it has been halted because it's not safe. So that's been having an impact and literally on the backbone of this economy, which comes down to be migrant workers. And then that it's their families, their children, they have to bring food to the table, keep the roof over their heads, and it keeps going and going. So definitely right now, COVID-19 has amplified much of the struggles that they had already. And they're actually spreading out, like for the things that we've been calling out for a long time when it comes to our families. So we run the parking lot where workers get dispatched out for jobs. We have like a co-op incubator. So we know that we also have to start building resilient economies where we support one another, and it's not going all to the top, right? Like not one only person is collecting all the power or all the money or the goods. So the owners of ultimately of this business is the workers when you have it as a co-op ecosystem. And the idea is that we can create enough different businesses that we can expand and start connecting all of these things and start building literally the world that we want to live in moving forward. And that way we don't depend so much on an economy that we know that does not center our people. We have a deportation defense program where the workers learn their rights. If they encounter police or they encounter the sheriffs, they encounter highway patrol, what to do, what to answer, what not to answer, who to call. Because at Tucson, Arizona is within the 100-mile radius that they call from the border. So we have border patrol patrolling our streets, and literally they're a call away from any local law enforcement. And even though we've been able to pass some city resolutions or like taken away some money from the county, that collaboration is still happening because it's so ingrained in these agencies to just detain and deport our people. So we have seen that happening all the time. They're still happening in the middle of the pandemic. And we know as a fact that in the detention centers, the numbers of people who are testing positive for COVID-19 continue to increase. So it's a health hazard even to come into the detention centers or to come in contact with any of these agents, regardless if it's local law enforcement or immigration enforcement. So we do some of that. We also have an accompaniment program. So we, and this was work that happened also before I came into the Worker Center. We were able to get some workers out of the detention center. We were able to prove and close their cases. And they got released back to us by paying bail money. But on their JAF session and the Department of Justice, they reversed some of the procedures or the powers that that judges had which meant all of those cases that had prosecutorial discretion from the judges were reopened. So now we have dozens of workers whose cases are open right now. And this is just a small group of people compared to the fact that there was many people whose cases happened between 2010 and 2015, 2016, and they now got reopened. And something that I want to highlight is we were able to trace them down because the workers they stay here. They committed themselves to be part of one space, and we were able to follow up with them. But there's many people out there who are not part of a space, and probably they have moved in the last 5 years at least once. So we know that they are probably on the system and they're being flagged as people that need to be deported because they didn't show up to their court, but nobody knows which cases actually got opened during that time. We have another program, which is the wage theft, which we have been able to recover thousands of dollars. As you can imagine, we work with a very vulnerable population where language is a barrier, sometimes cultural barriers, and also we have people who come through who are just trying to take advantage of workers, who are looking for cheap labor, or sometimes it's not even cheap, they're just trying to rip them from the money that they deserve for working. So through that program, we've been able to recover so much money. Some of that just requires a phone call, and as soon as the person who hired the workers hears somebody on the other line saying something in English, they come back around and turn in the money. Or sometimes they just need to see a formal letter addressing them where we know who they are, where they live, where they work, their license, whatever we had access to, and they pay the money. We have had very few cases where it's very difficult to collect information, and if no information was collected from the employer, most likely that we haven't been able to recover some of those wages. But just have in mind that people are out there trying to just take advantage of people, just trying to work and bring some money, some cash into their homes to pay for food, to pay for the roof over their heads. We also have some English classes. They are not your classic English classes. They are classes where people can learn what are the name of the tools in English, the tools that they use for gardening, the tools that they use for landscaping, or to build a wall, for landscaping, whatever it is. If they get hurt, if they go to the grocery store, if they end up going to the hospital, what they need to say and how they should say it so people understand what's happening, right? I don't know if everybody is bilingual here, but if you're not, when you don't speak the other language and you don't understand it, it's really hard. So at least we try to give some tools to the workers where they can defend themselves and advocate themselves until somebody else can show up, if possible, to do that connection or be the bridge of interpretation between the worker and whoever the other person is. We also do Know Your Rights trainings. And these are Know Your Rights for when it comes down to immigration, because we know that immigration, it's all around us, and we know that there are risks at any place that they go to. And then also for labor. So we want to make sure they know things so the workers understand that it is their right to get paid for the work, the hours that they worked, that they should get paid at least the minimum wage, that if they work over 48 hours, they have to get paid overtime. If somebody promised something to them, that the person has to do it. That is not their mistake, and make it very clear that it's never their mistake for accepting a job and the person not wanting to pay. Is never their mistake. So we have some of that. Also at the Worker Center, we are located in a very, we're on the edge of two cities, city of South Tucson and also the city, but then also we're very close to the highway. And sometimes we see border patrol just crossing the street because there's a gas station, a federal or local gas station where only cars that work for the government get their gas. So there's a lot of presence on the corners where we operate. And throughout the years, we have seen either the local police, either the highway patrol pull people over, and then just in front of us stripped family members and take them into custody. About a year ago, I was getting out of work, and I'm not gonna lie to you, like highway patrol decided to call border patrol. I had the day before that, like I made a presentation and told them another experience is like, knock on wood, it doesn't happen again. And then the next day it happened. So the highway patrol decided to call border patrol, and for the very first time, I think we got to see and also to record this collaboration that exists between local enforcement or traffic enforcement, as highway patrol is, and border patrol, taking into custody a child without verifying their status. Even though we have a public notary with the document signed, even though we had the family members there, that border patrol still decided to take in that family. And the child included. And this happened at the time where like the facilities for border patrol were overcrowded. The children were sleeping next to the toilet. Same thing for the mothers and same thing for the dads. There was no safety. There was nothing healthy about it. The kid was traumatized. She later got bullied after being released at school because she was taken into custody. And there's so many layers that come in, and the social impact that it has. And now imagine like it was just a child, a 12-year-old, probably doesn't understand what's happening. And this literally marked this family for their entire life. Lucky enough, they were only carrying one child. The other two children decided to ride with the auntie, and they were not in the same circumstances as the other daughter. But like, have this in mind, this happens every single day, regardless of where you live. And what we're seeing more and more is that these things are happening too fast even to react. And it's understanding that as local departments have a direct collaboration with immigration officials, there's also technology behind it. And that technology is being used as we don't have idea. So for example, when we're calling out Amazon because of the conditions that they have workers, not only during COVID, but then also like before that, also Amazon plays a key role when it comes to the detention of children. They have AWS, I think it's called, the Amazon Web Systems, where they collect all the data. Imagine just the amount of data that they can have access to. And then they have somebody like Palantir, who's another key role here, who facilitates connecting the dots. And then ICE or the Border Patrol agents can just carry the information on their phone, and it gives them a map or where each person is located at who is undocumented. And as they can use it for undocumented people, they are using it for other folks. And something that came out on the news today, and I think the other panelists probably cover the technology or the tactics that the Border Patrol uses, but they're now using drones that they use at the border. They're using them right now in Minneapolis to record and like just to patrol the area of the protesters. So those drones like can easily be used to attack people and to instigate other stuff. And this is probably some of you care about this enough, but like that's your money. And it's that your money unused, and it's being used literally to patrol people who are just like using their First Right Amendment. Like it's their freedom of speech. And it's also understanding that what happens to Black people, it's a brown issue as well. Immigration is like something that we all should like care about, but then also what we're seeing on how police brutality is killing Black people at a higher rates than other races. It's also something that we need to care about. And also understanding the tactics that police use to instigate and cause problems within the movements. And then if you're following what's happening in Minneapolis very closely, and I want to highlight, because I see some of the comments, it was police who started breaking the windows of the auto zone and painting the walls. Like they have already identified him, his family outed him. And if black people are doing things, understand their rage. Like they have done so many things like to bring attention to these issues, and what's happening right now is just the tip of the iceberg. And have this mind, isn't during COVID, like we're living a pandemic right now, and we should like really move away about caring about the physical things and start worrying about how we're gonna start creating a different world and support the people who are the most directly impacted. I cannot express this enough, because as we're seeing this in Minneapolis, it has happened in St. Louis and Ferguson. We saw in Florida, we saw in so many other cities and so many other states where you have your own local fight to fight, and you have to do it. Some of us have a very privilege. We're sitting in a very privileged areas where we're not directly impacted, not even from a different angle, just because we don't have those proximities to these issues, but doesn't mean that we should not be doing the work to really dismantle like this whole thing that is happening and start getting Black and brown, indigenous, queer folks, LGBTQ. I mean, the list can go on. And understanding that the current situation, it's even amplified with the administration of Trump. Like we literally have an outspoken white nationalist and an administration that their whole agenda is to really not care about the people and do the most damage possible, all in the name of American imperialism or capitalism, gain power, gain money. All of those things are true, all of them. Like whatever you want to look at them, all of them are truth. And it's understanding that we have to align ourselves and do the work with those who are the most directly impacted. How am I doing of timing? I'm on time, right?
You're good. Yep.
All right.
You are good.
So yeah, like I just wanted to make sure that when we're having these conversations and when you are done with the migrant trail, connect that, even though if you don't live in the borders area, connect those issues to the people who live in your city, in your town, in any state, because they are not very different, and there's always somebody who is literally paying the highest, and sometimes that means their life. And if we're not paying enough attention, and if we are not outraged right now, if we're not willing to take action, we're not really paying attention.
All right. That was amazing.
I was like, so I can see it's 6:10 already. I think it's 30 minutes.
You're okay. So what we're going to do at this point, as we've done on the last several evenings, we're going to take a 5-minute break. So that'll be 15 minutes after the hour, wherever you are. Our Zoom masters are going to switch everybody over to attendee mode. That Q&A box is now going to be active, and please put in your questions, and I'll be going through those and trying to see how many of those we can have Jessica answer. So without further ado, if you are all dismissed for about 5 minutes.
Sato, I finally got back in, just FYI.
Okay.
So I'm on version 5. If you want to give me control, give me host, I can try doing the interpreter thing again, but just for fun, but I don't think anybody's needing it tonight. But maybe for tomorrow night or Sunday. Oh, you did it. Roberto, if you're still on, could you let me know if you received the invitation? Oh, okay. Oh, I just made Jessica. Sorry. Roberto, see if you have it now. Are you receiving the invite? No? Okay. I just upgraded just for fun, just to see if it would work, and it doesn't seem to be changing anything. So we may need to try and figure that out for oh, okay.
So if any of you are trickling back in, please go ahead and put your questions into the Q&A box so that we can start looking through them. I'll give you a minute or so for that. I'm not seeing any questions posted so far, which is strange because we've had questions every night. Okay, looks like we have a few questions trickling in. Please go ahead and put some questions in there. I think we'll go ahead and get started, but just go ahead and add any questions if you'd like. So I will pose one question here. What are the possible outcomes from the Supreme Court ruling?
Right. And that one, I'm not an attorney, just to be clear, but I believe like there is 3 or 4 outcomes. So there's the main one that everybody wants is like, oh, what Trump did, it didn't follow X, Y, and Z process, and DACA cannot be taken away overnight, or it cannot be taken away under these circumstances. Then the second and the third option are very similar. It's just, it will say, we don't have, literally the Supreme Court can say, we don't have enough information from the Trump administration on the case. We will request more for the brief, X, Y, and Z. And the other one is like, oh, because we didn't have enough information, we're gonna make the decision based on what we do have, but it could be changed if they submit more information. And those 2 can just say, oh, DACA continues, but we leave the door open for more information to come in so they can change it. Like hinting, maybe if you do it this way, you can get away with that. And then there's the fourth one that it's simply and straightforward, that they can just say, oh, what Trump did is legal, that he can just use his powers to take away DACA. And if you don't know, it was just an announcement that happened like the day after Labor Weekend in 2017. Like he hadn't been not even a year in office and decided to take DACA away. And this is after, I don't know, like 3 Muslim bans at the time, and then came for DACA. So yeah, so there's like 4 options. We're hoping for the first one, no, you cannot take it, and people continue with their lives. But I wanna be conscious, like DACA is not a solution. DACA doesn't solve anything. DACA doesn't do anything. Like we know DACA folks who have been detained and deported. Doesn't give you protections of any sort. It only allows you to have access to a social security so you can find employment and meet the requirement of the federal government to be able to work. And it's not even 10% people qualify for DACA, and we still have 12 million people out there where the immigration system, it's outdated. And it's been outdated for such a long time, even before the amnesty in the 80s. It's been outdated for such a long time. And having in mind, is the US who has cause for all these people to migrate, because they exploited labor in foreign countries, or they exploited the resources that we used to have access to in the places that we come from.
Great. Here's another. What was the difference for you between having and not having DACA?
I was already living in Arizona. So I think that for me, that was like the layer of like, of the things that we were exposed to, and the fear in a way, and the resistance that we had at the time. I left after, so when you are in school, you really don't notice these things. Like when you are going through elementary, middle school, and even high school, you really don't ask yourself about your status. And this is like most general rule across the board. Like you needn't bother about these things unless you're trying to get a job or apply for scholarships or apply for universities. Once I graduated, I was very aware of my status. I migrated when I was a little bit older, so I knew what was going on. I paid, as I'm saying, I paid for school out of pocket. When DACA was announced, in the other hand, I still had to pay for school out of pocket. Like it did not create a difference or a visible, noticeable difference for me. We didn't have access to driver licenses. We didn't have access to in-state tuition. And I'm pretty sure there's other things, but those are like the 2 things that are like the most talked about. So for living in Arizona, it was not much of a change. But I'm pretty sure like for people who were living in states probably like New York or Chicago or maybe Los Angeles and California, like those places like they started like flourishing with all kinds of programs and all of these kind of people like just doing what they wanted to do because the resources were not available for them just because of this little piece. But for me in the personal, like it didn't change much when DACA was announced.
Okay, great. You are amazing. Thank you. If we want to hire people for a fair wage, how do we do that? How else can we help?
If you are from Tucson and you want to hire a worker, you can just send an email like to southsidecentro@gmail.com. Like, and this is for people who live in Tucson. If not, like there's a piece like you can just hire people for a fair wage. Like even if somebody's telling you, oh, it's gonna be $12, but if in your values is, and it should be everybody's values, oh, I'm gonna pay you at least 15. When we know that the minimum wage should be like in the 20s, like to make it like something sustainable. But if you are on that level where you are like, okay, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna start changing even my practices, it can be just done anywhere where you live.
Great. Thank you for your amazing work and for sharing with us. What keeps you going when the odds are so much against you and us?
Ooh, that's a good one. I think I have to say most of the time and ask myself that question. But I think there's little moments like when we show up for each other in ways that we didn't expect, like during difficult times. And it's also like the many relationships that you build throughout time. I mean, especially right now, right? Like what we're seeing right now. So I remember myself like, oh, like when we're recovering, even if it's like $50 for a worker, like just remember and like, oh, what does that mean for that person? Like it's very important. Or to see like and remember like the family, members of a family when their loved one is released. And then just like understanding that it's not their fault. It's just a system that is operating and very well for its purpose. I mean, there's a lot of things understanding, like giving more value to our humanity, I guess, and understanding that these things are not gonna change unless we are doing something about it.
Okay, there's one that's kind of a comment or two sort of comments. Perhaps everyone is not aware that DACA recipients have to renew every 2 years, paying $495 each one just so to the government. The government has been receiving quite a lot of money for this, and there are presently many, many DACA status who are on the front line working as nurses, et cetera, in healthcare fields. Do you want to talk a little bit about the process of actually getting DACA and the paperwork?
Yeah.
And
so for the folks who applied before 2017 for the first time, it's actually like you have to prove it's a long application the first time because literally you have to prove that you've been in the country since 2007. So it's at least 10 years where you had to prove where you live, that you went to school, that you did not have a criminal record that they can use against you. And then for those who apply for the first time are able to renew. And they pay $495 to USCIS. USCIS keeps their money on their own and they use it for their own operative expenses. Does not go directly to the Department of Homeland Security, but it is under the same umbrella. Just to make sure we understand a little bit of that, where the money goes, and then like who is actually managing those things, and then having in mind that the Department of Justice oversees and rules, right, what happens in all of these departments. So the 495, they just increased it last year. It used to be for 65 before that. But then just think of it, like if there's places where people are making like $6-7 an hour as minimum wage in some of the states. So just imagine how hard it's gonna be to reach to 495 and do it every other year. And it's not, you have to apply at least 6 months in advance. So you don't even reach to the 2-year mark when you already have to pay again for this application and fill it out and invest your time and go through all the process that requires you just to have this 2-year permit.
Okay, let me mark that one. There's one.
I missed the other part of it. There are many DACA status who are in the front line working as nurses and healthcare fields. Absolutely, there's many folks from all backgrounds. Just to understand who's at the forefront, the majority of them are people of color, migrants, regardless of status. Like, let's also consider that. And also like what we give value, right? Because if we're not talking about the janitors who are cleaning the hospitals, who are not like taking the sheets and washing them and taking them to where they need to go, setting up the rooms, it's much more beyond that just the doctors and the nurses. It's a whole operational system that exists inside the hospitals and outside, who are people on the front line. So there's many folks who are there.
Great. There's another question that came in. What advice would you give to undocumented high school students who are about to graduate and who don't qualify for DACA?
I think we all been there before. I think it's a very small window of people who haven't been there or who have never experienced that, what it means to graduate from high school and going as an undocumented person. There's many resources out there. There's many great people out there also who are like willing to walk you through the process of what that means. The truth is, it's very different on any state. But if college is what you want to do, like there's ways to do these things, and in places who are just gonna like literally allow you to bloom and on any shape or form that you want to go for. Then you have places in Arizona where like you really have to be pushing and pushing and pushing and constantly fighting. But when there's a will, there's a way. And I want folks also to think like, all right, what can we do? Like, and if this is the things that I want, also to reach out and ask for help. I think that's one of the things where like we keep a lot of things for ourselves and we keep them as a secret and we're not talking about it. I think when we start having these conversations and we start building relationships based on an interest or like something that we care about, that's when we start changing the narratives and also we start finding the things that fit the best for us.
Great. There's another question. Are there funds we can donate to help DACA folks with the fees?
Yes, there's many folks, many organizations who like dedicate their time to this kind of work. I cannot come up with the names right now, but there's one against like the Mission Street community something. Is based out of the Bay Area. They're really great. I think when DACA got taken away, they fundraised almost $500,000 just to give out to people who needed to reapply for DACA. There's also local efforts depending on your city that you live. And also, like, if you just have a local organization that does this kind of work, just ask. And if you're ready, like, to say, oh, I want to sponsor somebody who needs DACA, like, move forward in that direction. Like, there's always somebody. And sometimes, like, they are so close to you that you just have to ask.
Great. There's another great one. The good immigrant, bad immigrant narrative is usually used to discuss undocumented immigrants. Can you talk about how those narratives impact undocumented immigrants with and without DACA?
Yes. So that's like one of the conversations that like I really don't try like to use the good and bad immigrant narrative. And it's also most about understanding how we got here, right? Who caused all these things and who's profiting out of these things. Then also like thinking of the law enforcement system as a whole, who gets criminalized the most, and it is people of color. Who gets targeted the most, and it is poor and people of color. So like I think it's like understanding that And then that has absolutely been weaponized against immigrants, regardless of status. It's true, like they just have used to weaponize it. And especially when we have somebody who just posted on Twitter that we rape, that the immigrants rape and all these things. And also like endangers people, like when those narratives are being talked about, I think is something that we have seen many times. But like for me, it's more like, are you having these conversations with the people that you talk to when they start carrying out the good and versus bad immigrant, or the well-deserving and the not deserving? Or like, oh, they deserve this, but now you deserve jail and a cage and being brutalized and being even killed sometimes in the hands of enforcement. So I think it's also like not just like the full scoop of the narrative, but then also how we've been intentional when we're having these conversations with the people that we know. Like even when we go to those aunts that they wanna, they're racist and we know them, those uncles and grandpa, grandma, like we really need to start pushing them more to understand that this is beyond that. Like that narrative is just weaponizing it against us. So I think it's more about challenging folks to really have these conversations, to start deconstructing something that you literally consume from a racist person. In this case, it could be this administration.
Great. There's a question that came in on the chat. I'm curious more about the Migrant Co-op for the support of businesses. Can you tell us more about it? If possible, tell us which businesses can we support in Tucson and elsewhere?
Yes. So so far we have only incubated one. Is a Tucson rainwater harvesting co-op. So it's led by the workers from the Worker Center, and the whole idea is to do water installations, water tanks installations, so you can collect the water from the rain. So they do the entire piece. They also try to figure out if you can qualify for the program of the city, which matches like $1 per gallon, I think it is, of the installation. And then also the workers do work on landscaping, like, because they already have access to those tools, they already have access to those scales. So they also like they take a little further and they do landscaping, and then they, with the irrigation system, and then the water harvesting. So the name is Tucson Water Harvesting, and let me pull out the phone number so you all can have it if you're interested and you want to call them. They also do when they go check and give you they quote for the work that they do also. So you can just
estimates.
Yes. So it's Tucson Rainwater Harvesting Co-op, and the phone number is 520-425-1399.
Great. I wrote that down because I've been putting that out. We've been putting that off for a while.
But now you have a place, like if you live in Tucson, yeah, and then there's another one, there's another network that is being developed. We hope to also incubate more co-ops at the Worker Center. We'll see which direction we take on, but this was to meet like a need and also match up with the skills that the workers had at the time.
Great. I put that number in the chat. So if you wanted to, if you missed it when she said it, I wrote it down in the chat along with the name of the group so that you can do that. There's another question. Thanks for your work and courage. Can you talk anything about DAPA?
Yes. So we know that DACA was announced because of the pressure of undocumented youth doing civil disobedience across the country. And Obama's administration was literally pushed to take action and use executive power to announce DACA. DAPA was announced after also mobilization across the country, the undocumented that the No One More Deportation campaign did, and many other efforts, national efforts, to reach that point, right? Because if he could use it, if the administration was able to use it like for these group, he could expand it, right? So like we are like expanding the picture of who gets benefit from this, and also it was gonna open the path for folks to adjust status, also like to like renew the work permit maybe every 3 to 4 years. DAPA meant that it was also going to include our parents with deferred actions for parental arrivals or something like that. So it was very similar to DACA, but it was expanding the folks who could benefit from that. And it was just a work permit. It was the same thing, relief, quote unquote, relief from the administration. Unfortunately, after being announced, it got challenged. It was taken to the Supreme Court. It was struck down there. So it didn't have an opportunity. It did not have a chance. I think it was open like for a month before like something like they sue it, and it was like, I think it was like 24 states suing the US for having DAPA. And then all the attorney generals and governors from those states, or adding, if they were not matching, there were some individual also along with other mayors and county supervisors were just against DAPA. They were cool with DACA, but DAPA was too much, right? So yeah, it got struck down, I believe in 2015 or 2016. It was almost close, like a year after it got announced. So yeah, it never came through. It was never something that like we had access to it itself. But it's also like, I guess it's a way for us to be challenged. It's like, well, you know what, let's fight for more. If we're gonna fight for more, instead of just settling down for the breadcrumbs of the pie.
Okay. There's a question. I think that I will also respond to it after you. I noticed that the presenters this week are mostly younger and many are of color, yet the attendees are mostly older and white. What does this say about how we can solve these big problems together?
I think that's a really good problem to have. And let me break it down. So yeah, the people, probably folks are, now younger folks are taking leadership roles, which is necessary to move forward, like, and to be more radical on the way that we do things in a way, right? Like we are coming with this more vision of an expanded view of how we would like to see things. And then this is just like on the leadership aspect, right? Like, and we're thinking like these fights have been going for decades. So folks are probably getting retired, organizations are getting developed, issues are coming up, things are happening at the border that were not happening even 10 years ago. So yeah, like you're gonna see a lot of people who are taking care of more, not only of our people, but then ourselves, our land. And I forgot to do this, but like I wanted to recognize that those folks that at least were in Tucson, we are an occupied land and this land belongs to the Tohono O'odham people. But then also like anywhere you live, like you are living in occupied land and belongs to the indigenous people of that area. So have that in mind also. I forgot to do that. Usually I do it at the beginning. So just folk are like understand what's happening and what has caused it all this time, right? Like it's this history of displacing and genocide that we have done always to people of color. And then,
did you want to add more there?
Yes, so that was the first part. The second part about the attendees are mostly older and white. There's something good about that, and take it to another step. We need people who are older and white to start risking more, right? We know if a young person gets arrested, the entire life is gonna be done, their life, right? Like with a single arrest, and this is just a very basic example, but there's many more. Like a basic, an arrest of any sort, even if the charges don't come through, is gonna really taint the life of that person for the rest of their lives. And they're gonna carry it with themselves. If you're white and you're older, you have a privilege. And trust me when I say that, because when the police sees it, when authority sees it, the judges, and even like people walking on the street, like when you use just your body as a way to shield anything that is happening, even if it's a discussion where the brown person is being yelled at, or where there is a confrontation with the police, sometimes using just your body, just like get in the middle, let's see what happens, can literally prevent that person like from being impacted for the rest of their lives. And there's many tactics that it can be used. Most of the time when we do accompaniment for the courts, we ask the older white people, especially the women out there, like, hey, come and join us, because judges are afraid of like older people who are paying attention. And especially right now when there's this body where we know that you all can be more active, you probably already retired, like you can probably with privilege that we don't have, like that, let's put that to use. And the way that this question was framed is actually a good problem to have. I don't think that it's bad. It's just like how we really take it to the next step to really start changing the conditions that were created right now. Kat.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that. I think for me right now, I've been working on border issues since 2000, since I moved to Arizona. And all of these powerful movements that have come started with the Dream Act. And some of us remember when that was brand new and we had all this faith in it. And over time, we really do see youth being the leaders of the resistance. Youth is thinking outside of the box and trying these new radical approaches and really pushing in ways that are amazing and incredible. And I think that one of the most important thing, as someone who's not a white person, as someone who I have been treated different all my life, who has all of those isms facing them, one of the most powerful things I think that privileged people, especially older white privileged people, is to learn to pour the power of your privilege into amplifying the voices of people doing that work. You know, wedge open spaces for those voices and those presence and those faces to be, because we're constantly being silenced, we're constantly being othered. You see it everywhere, you know, academia, people of color doing work, their work is often stolen or co-opted. It's the same in all of these different communities. So I think one of the things, you know, the theme that Migrant Trail has always carried is the words that we use is bear witness. And bear witness doesn't mean that you stand there and see it, like that you're a witness, that you watch it. It's that you actually sit with it and hold it, and then you move. Like you are walking, but when you go back home, we want you to keep walking. We want you to keep moving and acting and following through. And that is, to me, one of the most powerful things I've seen come from the Migrant Trail, is that people go home and they don't stay quiet, and they do walk and they do get involved. And there's many opportunities to connect in local communities and many opportunities to support. It used to be somewhat of a critique of the Migrant Trail that most of the participants were white, but you know, undocumented people don't need to do this walk. They live it. That, you know, their family has lived it. They don't need to do that. They understand in different ways, and so I think that this is it's a safe space as much as we are able to make it for people to understand the power of that whiteness, to understand the power of that privilege, to understand and think about how you can use that to amplify the voices of the people who are consistently and constantly and repeatedly silenced. So that's my response to that question. And then there's a hell yes from somebody to something you said earlier. I think it was when you were talking about people putting their bodies on the line. And then we have, I'm gonna read a comment from our interpreter that's in the chat, just for people to think about, speaking to the choir here, but one of the common threads this week, and perhaps one of the key takeaways, I'm new to the Migrant Trail, is the confluence of border militarization, the targeting of minorities, and the consequences beyond the geographical border. Just today, there is a key piece of news. The federal government is using a Border Patrol anti-terrorism drone over Minneapolis. And Thank you, Roberto, for that comment. That is definitely, do you want to say anything to that, Jessica?
I think I spoke a little bit about it when I was talking about the things that were happening in Minneapolis, but then also like just have like this is technology that the U.S. has already tested. Like now they're sending it inland, right? Like to somewhere like to Minneapolis, but this is something that they've been using already in the border. So just have that in mind. That nothing of this is new. Like yes, technology keeps evolving, but usually they have already tested in other areas. And even if it's not if it wasn't in the U.S. border, like in the Arizona border, there's a really high chance that these things were already used and weaponized in other countries, because the U.S. is responsible of many things and atrocities that are happening across the world. And most likely this technology is also being used over there, and also how the U.S. aids genocide of people in other places, and that includes the genocide that is happening right now to the Palestinian people.
Great. So our final question is actually a comment from Annette. I am in deep admiration. Oh, never mind. There are two more. I'm in deep admiration of and awe of you, your work and your courage. Thank you. Jessica, thank you greatly for sharing. I appreciate and I'm listening deeply. Could you please provide some advice for us in New England on how we can be better advocates?
Yeah, like look, I'm not familiar with the area. I'm not sure there's groups, like which groups are the ones that are active there. But look for those groups who are active, and also the groups that are led by directly impacted people. Like don't go like to places that are led by white folks or church folks or like folks who are not directly impacted. Because that like, and I think that's like the break that happened with the youth movement with the DREAM Act, is that like directly we were at the front lines and taking the leadership on roles. And also the majority of those folks by now are probably the executive directors of amazing organizations right now. So I'm pretty sure that there should be an organization out there. I can probably figure it out, like we can ask around and see which organization you can sign up with. There's also people who are out there doing amazing work. I don't know if you ever heard of Cosecha. They do most of their work on the East Coast. They're a really good group. They're led by undocumented people. I think they have done like driver licenses in New Jersey. And then you have Make the Road New York, which were behind making sure undocumented folks had access to driver licenses. Both of them are organizations that are led by undocumented or migrant people. And I think those are the only two that I can think of right now who do work. And that's the thing, that do work on the ground. Because we have a lot of organizations who are only administrative and not really have contact on the daily basis with people on the ground. So that's the other piece. Make sure you're supporting people who are doing the work on the ground, because then in the case, it just doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't get where it needs to get.
Great. Okay, well, I think that is it. Tom just put a comment. Minneapolis, like 80% of the US population is in the 100-mile Constitution-free zone along every border. So I think those of us who live on the border would say to all of you that the border is no longer on the border. It's bled into the interior, and it is definitely in your community, if not in the next community near you. So that is all of our questions for tonight. I would like to just thank Jessica Rodriguez again so much for being part of this, for being open to sharing your story and for answering questions. I have a few little housekeeping things. Just a reminder about those reflection links that are in your morning emails. It's an opportunity for you to share, for you to process. There's a lot going on in our home, in our communities as you walk outside each day to try to be outside. So you can use that space to process those things as well. Tomorrow in your email, there's also going to be a link to the Presente documentary, which is a documentary that was put together by Jason Aragon from Pan Left. He is also a past participant. who put together a documentary about the Migrant Trail. And so we've included a link for tomorrow morning if you want to watch it. It's about 30 minutes long. We'll also have an email in your email tomorrow, a link for the talent show. Those of you who walked on the Migrant Trail know that usually on Friday night, we do a talent show where we sit around and people bust out with some pretty amazing talents, singing, poetry, dancing. There's all different kinds of things. So there'll be a link there for you to sign up for the talent show. So following tomorrow's program, at the end of the webinar, like where we are right now, we will take a short break and then we will start the talent show for those who wish to stay on. So that's an option. You can check out and just go to bed, or you can stay on and hang out with us a little bit and figure out what talents all these other folks have. And just a reminder about, you know, considering all the conversations we had tonight and the things that are happening in our own communities, and recognizing the deep, deep pain that our sisters and brothers in the Black community are just suffering right now. You know, recognizing the importance of understanding why Black Lives Matter and why we have to say Black Lives Matter. So I'd like to send some extra love, and if we can all channel some love to all of the people who are in communities that are struggling right now, that are enraged and in pain and hurting and are responding in the ways that they're trying to, and reminding us all to respond with compassion and to understand that people aren't doing that for no reason, and that historical pain is so long and so in need of being heard and being changed. So yeah. I will end there. Did you want to say, go ahead.
Yes, I read one of the comments like on the by Steve Clements. I don't have the post with me, but I think it's something really good to look for. There is this like the name of the restaurant is the Gandhi Mahal restaurant. It's in Minneapolis. I don't have like right now the post, but it's like they posted something on their social media that it's worth to look at it, and they were okay with their building burning, and it's a family-owned business, migrant people, because they know that and they understand the rage that is happening right now, and the justice that needs to be served to at least honor some of the pain that it's happening right now. And they say why, like and it was beautiful written. I have never read something like that from a business, but it's something to just really consider. Like literally, it's the small businesses are the ones who are gonna support us in the difficult times. It's not gonna be the corporate ones. So if you can look it up, that way you can read their posts, and then also like just to understand, and I think open up a little bit more what's happening.
I will look for that, and if I find it, I will share it to the Migrant Trail Facebook group.
I did share it from my Facebook. So
oh, great! I can steal it from there. I mean, borrow it, share it. So okay, all right, we are set. I think that we are finished. Thank you all again for another wonderful evening. I will say good night to you all, and I hope you all have a lovely evening. And once again, thank you to Jessica.
No, thank you all for having me and for taking the time to learn a little bit more.
All right. Good night.
Bye.
So are people staying here for the talent show thing, or?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow
yes.
night. That's tomorrow night. All right.
Yes, it's tomorrow night.
I knew that.
Yes, but they will stay on. Yeah.
I knew that. Have a
Good
good night,
night,
everybody. Say good night, Eric.
Say good night.